For decades, ruthless criminal organizations have controlled billions, influenced governments, and terrorized entire nations. These drug empires built fortunes through violence, corruption, and fear. But how did they rise to such power? And what ultimately led to their downfall? Today we'll uncover the shocking history of the world's most dangerous cartels, how they started, their rise to dominance, and the events that brought them crashing down. From the Medellín Cartel in Colombia to the Sinaloa Cartel in Mexico, we'll dive into their operations, their most infamous leaders, and the brutal tactics they used to maintain control. But despite decades of law enforcement efforts, drug cartels continue to operate, evolving their methods and adapting to modern technology. Are we truly winning the war on drugs? Or are the cartels more powerful than ever? Chapter 1. The birth of the drug trade and early cartels. The global drug trade has existed for centuries, but it wasn't until the late 20th century that it became a multi-billion-dollar empire controlled by cartels. The roots of modern drug cartels can be traced back to the 1970s and 80s, when organized crime groups in South America and Mexico saw an opportunity to profit from the increasing demand for illicit substances, particularly in the United States. The Medellín Cartel and the rise of Pablo Escobar. One of the earliest and most notorious drug cartels was the Medellín Cartel, founded by the infamous Pablo Escobar. In the late 1970s, Escobar took advantage of the growing demand for cocaine in the United States. He created a sophisticated smuggling network, using planes, speedboats, and hidden compartments to flood the US market with massive amounts of cocaine. At its peak, the Medellín Cartel was making an estimated $420 million per week, becoming one of the richest criminal organizations in history. Escobar wasn't just a drug lord, he was a symbol of power. He built hospitals, schools, and housing for the poor, earning him the nickname Robin Hood among some Colombians. But behind this generosity was a ruthless criminal empire built on violence, assassinations, and corruption. Escobar bribed politicians, police officers, and even judges to maintain control. Those who didn't cooperate were often executed in broad daylight. The Guadalajara Cartel and the birth of the Mexican drug trade. While Colombia dominated the cocaine trade, Mexico was becoming the key gateway to the United States. The Guadalajara Cartel, led by Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, pioneered the large-scale smuggling of cocaine from Colombia through Mexico. Known as El Padrino, or the godfather of drug trafficking, Gallardo was the mastermind behind the cartel's structure, creating a system that allowed different factions to work together while avoiding direct confrontation with law enforcement. Unlike Escobar, Gallardo operated with extreme discretion, preferring to stay out of the public eye. However, his empire came crashing down in 1985 after the brutal torture and murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena. The killing sparked one of the largest US investigations into cartel operations, leading to Gallardo's arrest and the eventual fracturing of his organization. Chapter 2. The Golden Age of the Cartels, 1980s, 2000s. With the fall of the Medellín and Guadalajara cartels, new organizations emerged, each more sophisticated and ruthless than the last. The Colombian cocaine trade shifted to the Cali cartel, which operated with a more corporate approach, using high-level corruption and money laundering to avoid the violent reputation of their Medellín rivals. In Mexico, the drug trade became even more complex. After Félix Gallardo's arrest, his empire splintered into separate groups, each vying for control. Two of the most powerful organizations to emerge were the Sinaloa Cartel, led by Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, and the Gulf Cartel, which would later spawn one of the most violent criminal groups in history, Los Zetas. The Sinaloa Cartel and the empire of El Chapo. El Chapo was different from previous cartel leaders. Rather than relying solely on violence, he focused on logistics and innovation. He used underground tunnels, submarines, and private jets to transport drugs across borders without detection. His cartel was responsible for moving massive quantities of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl into the United States, making it one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. But El Chapo's rise to power wasn't without bloodshed. The Mexican drug war, which began in the mid-2000s, saw brutal conflicts between cartels, with thousands of civilians caught in the crossfire. Cities like Juarez and Tijuana became battlegrounds as rival groups fought for control over lucrative smuggling routes. Los Zetas, the most violent cartel in history. While the Sinaloa cartel built its empire through corruption and smuggling, Los Zetas took a different approach. Terror. Originally formed by elite Mexican military deserters, Los Zetas used their military training to carry out assassinations, kidnappings, and massacres. Their brutal tactics included beheadings, public executions, and mass graves. They instilled fear not only among rival cartels but also among civilians and law enforcement. Chapter 3: The Crackdown and the Fall of Cartel Leaders. As cartel violence escalated, governments around the world began cracking down. In 1993, Pablo Escobar was gunned down on a rooftop in Medellín, marking the end of his cartel's reign. But rather than stopping the drug trade, his death only led to more fragmentation and more ruthless competition. El Chapo was captured multiple times but managed to escape from prison, most famously through a tunnel that led directly to his prison cell. However, in 2016, he was finally recaptured and extradited to the United States, where he was sentenced to life in prison. His fall marked a significant blow to the Sinaloa cartel, but it didn't dismantle the organization entirely. Los Zetas, once one of the most feared cartels, faced internal conflicts and military operations that weakened their power. Many of their top leaders were either arrested or killed, leaving the organization fractured and vulnerable to rival groups. Chapter 4: The Cartel Evolution and the Future. Despite the arrests of major cartel leaders, the drug trade has not disappeared. Instead, it has evolved. Modern cartels now operate like multinational corporations, using encrypted communication, cryptocurrency, and even artificial intelligence to run their operations. New synthetic drugs such as fentanyl have replaced cocaine as the primary product trafficked into the United States, creating an even deadlier crisis. The power struggle between the Sinaloa cartel and its rival, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, continues to drive violence in Mexico, while smaller, fragmented groups fight for control over drug routes. So the question remains, will the world ever see an end to the cartel era? Or will these criminal empires continue to adapt and thrive, staying one step ahead of law enforcement? What do you think? Will cartels ever be completely dismantled? Or will they continue to evolve in new and unexpected ways? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more crime and history content.